Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this session on building a data custodian to drive group-wide analytics. My name is Karthikeyan Rajashekharan. I'm the Senior Director for Data and AI Solutions for Microsoft Asia Pacific. You got my email address on there. And also on the call is Tamarai, who is the Data and AI Product Marketing Manager for Microsoft Asia Pacific. In the next half an hour, what Tamarai and I are going to be doing is basically talk to you a bit about what it takes to aggregate information from all across your organization and even external to your organization and use that to build a holistic view of a customer and use that in many different ways, including servicing your customers better and driving a better monetization strategy for all the information that you have. I work with customers across the whole of Asia Pacific, and if anything at all, in the current circumstances that we find ourselves in, everybody realizes that data is absolute gold, and everybody realizes the value of having data to drive strategic digital transformation. But the journey to get there is often fraught with difficulties and often fraught with different kinds of challenges. So let's start there first, right? Let's start there by looking at it as what does it take to unlock digital innovation? Now, the way we think about it at Microsoft is that we think about this as a notion of a continuous feedback loop that provides you with better ways to engage with your customers, empower your employees, transform your products, and optimize your operations. If you're able to store and instrument your processes and your products in the finest grain possible, then that allows you to bring data and AI services on top of that fine-grained data, and that drives a virtuous cycle of feedback loops that we call a digital feedback loop that allows you to better all the four pillars that typically any organization cares about. How do I work with my customers? How am I making sure my employees feel empowered and have the right access to the right information at the right time? And how am I designing products that make sense for the customers that I'm working with? And finally, how am I using that information to actually optimize the way I'm looking at my operations? That's the central theme of how we look to unlock digital innovation. Now, if you look at the range of capabilities that one needs to have and think about it between foundational capabilities and innovation capabilities, foundational capabilities are the absolute basics that one's need, and then the innovative capabilities build on top of those to drive strategic value and other capabilities. And traditionally, people have thought about this in completely separate axes of having intelligent applications and having data intelligence as a separate axis. But we believe that to make this happen, there is never a one-size-fits-all scenario, but you think about it as a journey, right? With incremental steps towards a long-term goal, and then it becomes a much less daunting proposition than what I spoke about before. And organizations that go through that are typically organizations that have looked at the strategy, the culture, the unique potential, and the technical capabilities, and looked at a convergence between the data migration and the app modernization together to drive this across their entire organization. Now, to be able to do this, you need to capture all the critical information and then take that critical information and use it to drive signals from these new software infused sources, right? And that's absolutely critical. And so it's super important as organizations think about modernizing. They also need to think about how all of that comes together with innovation in a converged way so that you can truly drive digital transformation. Now, what we have found as a very interesting trend that is emerging is as organizations use data and information to drive that digital feedback loop and unlock digital innovation, there is an increase in the way organizations think about pooling information to drive intelligent feedback loops. Right, and we see this cut across all different kinds of industries, from healthcare, agriculture, energy and sustainability, retail, etc. Quite recently, I was working with one such customer in the retail sector where they're working with all the suppliers upstream and also through the specific brands that are putting the merchandise in the retail stores to pool all of that information together in a safe, secure manner that also protects the individual user's privacy, to be able to use that demographic data for demand and price optimization. And that's just one example. Now, one of the things I always tell my customers is data comes in many, many different forms, right? And you can have structured, unstructured on one axis, and internal and external on another axis. And there's plenty of insight to be had by looking at every one of those boxes in those 4 quadrants. Equally, there is some very good insight to be had when we mix the data from these different boxes together to actually drive net new insights as well. And in the Asia Pacific region, we have organizations that cut across a wide range of geographies, and often at times being able to pool that information from these different geographies, or in some cases, pool that information from different seemingly independent business units, to have them all come together to be able to drive that kind of analytics is super critical. Now, one such customer of ours, the Dubai conglomerate Al-Futtaim, did precisely that. They're a really large conglomerate, and they have many, many different businesses. I think they have roughly about 8 different business lines, and they're one of the most progressive business houses. They have everything from IKEA, Toyota, Marks and Spencer, Orient, etc. And they were super focused on placing buyers' needs at the forefront of decision making. And the key insight that they had is that one cannot personalize anything without a fine-grained view of the customer, right? And this is the insight that Richard Wingfield, the Director of Data and Analytics at Al-Futtaim Group, came to. So what he worked with us, and we put together a customer data platform that took information from all the different divisions within there and brought them all together within a single unified view, so that customer identity is resolved across all of those 6 divisions. And then that in turn allows them to be able to provide super fine-grained personalization for their customers, right? So it's not just about driving the next best offer to the customer, not just about finding out different ways of increasing the lifetime value, but also being able to have a really good view of how do you drive a customer-centric service, right? And so the number of sources that they had to blend in this particular exercise from across their group was about 40 different sources, including loyalty programs, social registering, point of sale. And the true value comes from being able to do that at a group-wide level and being able to share that insights across that entire group. Once that aggregation happened, then the AI-based platform that they built on top of that aggregates that granular data and then drives customer engagement across more than 120 brands that the group is serving. So this is one such example, right? To truly drive the next level of customer engagement and digital transformation, they required them to actually bring all of that together in a holistic way. Similarly, we have another customer, Walgreens, and they're a 118-year-old pharmacy and retail chain, and they have more than 9,500 plus stores, multiple divisions. They employ close to 240,000 people, and their ultimate goal is to serve the community around its stores by providing convenience and ensuring the right products are always in stock. So to determine products which customers want by division, by geography. They had to do the similar kind of an approach that Alpha Them Group went through to be able to move all of those sources of data into an analytics capability in the cloud and be able to derive that kind of insight that actually gets them there. So we worked with all of these customers on these journeys. But if you were to take a step back and ask the question, so I need to bring all of that information together, whether it's across my multiple subsidiaries, multiple business units, and I need to set up a data custodian within my organization to enable this kind of a group-wide data collaboration and data monetization. So what would those components look like, and what would be the shape of what that architecture at a very high level look like, right? On this chart here, we're trying to go through what that ought to be. So if the data custodian at the center needs to take care of collaboration management, audit and governance, and the standardization of how that information is going to be brought into the system. Now, when you have a large organization and multiple different business units, typically each of those business units have their own repository of information, their own way of looking at it, the data lakes, and how that information is stored. And particularly in the Asia Pacific region, often at times being able to share information even across multiple business units within a very large organization tends to be a complex challenge in and of own self. But that's where one needs to think about the notion of a data mesh type architecture, where there's discipline and management at the core, but federation of how these data lakes are all put together, right? Now, the idea behind setting up this data custodian is to enable the multiple business units and subsidiaries to really collaborate on complex data to create AI/BI insights. And like I said before, bringing that data together from the different business units actually affords net new insights that were previously not available to the individual business units by themselves. And in some of our customers, this has actually enabled them to drive net new products and services by allowing them to monetize that information and facilitate exchanges of that information with third parties, right? And one growing trend that we are seeing increasingly within the Asia Pacific region is that in all of the large organizations with multiple business units are now slowly moving towards a mobile super app that extends the customer lifetime value. So instead of individual business divisions having their own loyalty and notion of customer identity, being able to fuel all of that through a single super app that is focused on the entire business group as a whole is a huge differentiator that allows a range of business benefits, from insights for new services and business models, driving customer insights for really hyper-focused and hyper-personal offerings. And interestingly, it also gives a fair amount of value in terms of the predictive nature of how a customer interacts with the product and etc. So at a high level, that's the key reason for going after setting up such a data custodian within your organization. Now, if you want to embark on that journey to set up a data custodian, what are the components for such a group-wide data and AI approach? And there are 4 different components that we see are absolutely critical. One is around the data sharing and exchange. And this could be cross business unit data exchange. It could also be cross organizational data exchange. The second absolutely critical piece is about how do you govern the centralized data custodian itself. The third one is around how do you use that information to get BI, AI insights in a centralized manner so that the burden of building these models can be diffused and much more rapidly developed. And the last one is what I spoke about earlier, which is around the notion of federation of the data lakes themselves across the different business units with a data mesh architecture. So if you have these 4 components in place, the journey to building that data custodian becomes much, much simpler. And we have been through this journey with several of our customers. Now, let me pick up the first piece of that, which is around the notion of a data sharing patterns. When we look at data sharing patterns, there are 3 basic topologies that continuously happen from all of the customer exchanges that we have had so far. The first one is a 1:1 data share, which is one party shares the data with another party. Second one is around data distribution, where one party shares the same data set with multiple different parties. And the third one is around this notion of data pooling, which is an N:1 data exchange, where multiple parties contribute to a collaborative data lake secured by a custodian in exchange for insights. The third data pattern that we see as a data pooling pattern is the pattern that we typically find when an organization tries to set up a data custodian for driving group-wide AI and insights. And there are many different ways to do this, but one of the key capabilities that has actually helped our customers do this is what we call as Azure Data Share. This allows you to easily share data. It's flexible, so you can share by snapshot or in place. It's secured and controlled, and you can use the power of Azure Analytics tools to enhance the data. So typically when we go through this data custodian journey with our customers is look at the different business units and then figure out what kind of a data share needs to happen across these different business units and subsidiaries, and then help them configure that and make that easy to use methodology by which how that happens, right? Now, this is just about the notion of how the data exchange actually happens. What this ultimately helps to do is to make this notion of sharing big data with other organizations or with other business units within your own organization a very simple exercise. And this is super critical, right? Once you have done that, it allows you to collaborate with really large data sets and allows you to enrich and innovate on top of those data sets. In short, it allows the range of analytics to be much more expanded. Now, you could still ask the question is, what about the actual data models on the basis of which these data exchanges happen? And what we do in those to answer that particular part of the puzzle is to work with something that we call as industry data models. Within our product stack, we have many predefined industry-specific domain models already prefabricated. So this allows the custodian to set up that prefabricated model once, and then all of the different BUs and subsidiaries contribute into that prefabricated model without ever having to expose or export the entirety of the data lake within each of those business units. So you still have discipline at the core while affording flexibility at each of the subsidiary units. So that's around the data share piece. The second most equally important piece is around once all of that information comes into the custodian, how do you manage the data governance process on that? Right, and that's where another capability within our Azure stack comes into play, which we call as Azure Purview. It allows you to create a data catalog from all of those different data sources, and it then allows you to easily answer questions like provenance and where did that data come from, what is the lineage, etc. And you're also able to do data classification on different levels of sensitivity you want to attribute to that piece of information as well. So first, we have the sharing capability that allows you to bring all of that information from the different subsidiaries or even from external sources. And then Azure Purview allows you to establish governance on top of that unified data sets that really allow you to make sure that you have the right level of sensitivity across all of that information and set up rules as to who sees what, etc. Now, those are 2 pieces of the puzzle I spoke about. And then there are last 2 pieces, which is how do I unify that? Now I've shared the data, I've established a governance model on top of the data, and then I need to be able to drive AI insights, and I need to be able to drive the federation of the data lakes themselves. And that's where the combination of Azure Customer Insights and Azure Synapse come into play. Customer Insights is a business user focused visualization layer, which allows you to do many different things like enrich, measure, create AI-based segmentations of your customers themselves. And Synapse Analytics is the workhorse there where people like your data scientists go in and create net new models, which then get surfaced in the customer insights layer. So the customer insights layer is purely business driven. There's hardly any code in there. And it shortens the time to value for your business user to be able to peruse that unified customer view and then be able to do the next actions on that, while at the same time affording your data science teams the capability to drive really agile experiments, because underneath it all of the information is stored in a common data model on Azure Data Lake. That makes it super easy for you to drive net new experiments on top of that data and then find out new features, expose those new features in an AI model, and that AI model gets pulled into customer insights. So that 1-2 punch and combination of Azure Synapse and Customer Insights takes care of both the layer at which the business value is transferred to the business user, and at the same time empowering an agile experimentation layer for all of your data scientists and data engineers. Now, once those insights are ready, you can push them out onto line of business applications, Power BI as a dashboard, or Power Apps as a smart application layer onto which some of these get pushed out. And there are many channels of engagement on which you can actually go out and interact with that end user. So those are the 4 components. The first component is around being able to have that data exchange capability. Second component is the ability to have a governance model on top of that data exchange capability. And the third and fourth component are around federation of the data lakes and the ability to infuse AI insights on top of that. Ultimately, the reason for us to be doing all of this is to be able to create deep customer loyalty with a comprehensive view. And that's the ultimate aim, because all of these different ways of bringing all of that information together is to get that one single view of the customer. Now, what does that one single view typically look like? Now, here is a sample screenshot of what all of that looks like within a single customer pane. And this is obviously all fictitious data, but here you can get a sense of this particular customer, what their particular attributes are. For example, what are the brands that they find interesting? What is the timeline of activities that we have had with them? What is the potential that this customer could churn and go somewhere else? What's the estimate of the customer lifetime value? What has been their average spending? Each of these are individual panels of information and predictive insights that have all been surfaced into the customer insights layer from underneath the Synapse processing layer, for whom the data had been aggregated to the data share and governed by Azure Purview. So that's how that entire stack is built out to deliver this unified view of the customer. So you have one profile with attributes from all sources. And in some cases, we actually provide some proprietary Microsoft enrichment as well. And what activities go into that timeline, what kind of predictive insights go into that view. These are all measures and means by which you can actually bring them in by putting that stack together with these 4 components. And we have done this for many different customers, and the value transfer to the business user is phenomenal. Now, for example, based on these predictive insights, you can create AI-driven marketing segmentation and then use that to drive digital marketing campaigns against those particular segments of customers. For example, customers whose lifetime value, predicted lifetime value is say $1,500, but they haven't used product X in our offering from the entire group. You could drive a very targeted digital marketing campaign against that particular segmentation. Now, these kind of AI-driven segmentation characteristics were not easy to do before. So I have talked to you through the opportunity that lies from unifying all of that data from across your group, the 4 components that you need to make a data custodian happen. But what does the typical journey look like when you start to actually implement it? So, and we typically work with our customers on this kind of a journey of bootstrapping a data custodian with an organization. And it's a journey, right? It doesn't happen overnight. And typically we split that up into a couple of different phases. The first phase is about inspire and ideation, then it's set up and design, then we empower and build, and then we get to a point of where it's ongoing sustenance and maintenance, right? So we typically start by figuring out the analytics and AI maturity. We define the data governance for the custodian entity right at the start, because that's absolutely critical. And we model a center of excellence for analytics and AI design within that data custodian, right? So once that comes into the custodian, how do you do all of that? It helps if you can identify some pilot subsidiaries or pilot business units who see the value in that data exchange. If possible, also identify pilots for external collaborators for data monetization as well. If you're in the retail space, for example, an FMCG brand might be a good collaborator in that early stage as well. Then we move into setup and design, where we set up the collaborator model at the custodian. We identify key AI models and use cases, and then put those data governance requirements into standards and processes, customize and establish that data exchange. And then obviously you have to set up the same data share models for the individual Azure subsidiaries, the individual subsidiary environments as needed. And then you get to the empower and build phase, which typically takes about a quarter. The fastest is about a quarter, because there's a fair amount of moving parts that need to get done. So get the data ingestion in the custodian formats, put them all together, get to that unified view, and then get the implementation going. And this phase, we typically bring in our engineering teams to help you with an architecture review as well. And around the 6th month, you get to a sustain phase where the analytics venture is up and running, the custodian is up and running, the first insights get to production, third-party exchanges in production, and then you have a reference library and a transition playbook that you can use continuously. So that's typically the journey that our customers take. And how do we help? I mean, we have a whole range of services that we provide that helps you walk through those different pieces. We have maturity assessments, data strategy journeys that we work with our customers to make sure that you tackle both the culture, the foundation, AI analytics use cases for the custodian, and how you shape them into a 1 to 3 horizon plan. With those in place, it allows you to be able to truly unlock the value of data right across your entire organization, irrespective of which business unit or subsidiary in which country that data resides, to bring it all together to drive truly group-wide data and analytics. With that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions in the live chat that I can potentially take.
Thanks for a very insightful session, Karthik. Don't see any questions on the chat yet. We still have about a minute left, and if any of you in the audience have any questions, you can still type out your questions in the Q&A section. We'll try and answer 1 or 2. But meanwhile, thanks to all of you who joined us today on this presentation. Sorry, Karthik, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to, reach out to myself or Tamara, and we are perfectly happy to walk you through this in a bit more detail, walk you through all the different 4 components that I spoke about. And we do do this quite regularly for our customers. We actually take those 4 components, walk you through the data strategy of how that would come together, and help you envision and help you bring that data custodian within your organization to fruition. So feel free to reach out to us, and we're always here to listen, learn, and help you along on your journey to become a truly data-driven organization. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Hope what we shared resonated with all of you. Thanks once again for joining us today.